Hi, and welcome to Be Your Own Best Coach Conversations, where you can learn to shift your mindset, change your behavior, and do more stuff you care about. I'm Glen Lubbert, one of the co founders of Be Your Own Best Coach, a 5-week group coaching program. In this special episode, I share an excerpt from one of our Be Your Own Best Coach guest contributors. It's part of a series of guest interviews within the program. Let's take a listen. Nilla Former. She's a visionary strategist, technology innovator, and the author of 3 books on how to build innovative cultures. A former executive from multiple tech companies, including Apple, where she was once sworn at by Steve Jobs himself, Merchant has personally launched more than 100 products, netting $18 billion in sales. Her latest moniker won't surprise you when you hear her ideas. She was given the Future Thinker Award by the notable London-based organization Thinkers 50, saying she's the #1 person most likely to influence the future of management in both theory and practice. Today, she's here to talk to us about how to unlock the innovation we all need to be using, the power of onliness. And she's also my friend of, more than 10 years now, actually, Nilla. And over the past 7 years, I've watched this idea evolve and deepen as she's been working on it. And I, too, have been working on my own onliness. So I really wanted to have her join us here and wanted to start by asking you if you can describe to our listeners what onliness is.
Sure. Let's start there. So onliness. Each of us stands in a spot in the world only one stands in. And from that spot, from our history and experience, as well as our visions and hopes, we contribute to the world that which only we can. Onliness. And we might compare it to like the only one, where you're the only one in the room. Maybe you're the youngest, maybe you're a person of color in a room full of mostly white people, maybe you're the white person in front of a room full of only colored people, or so on, right? Whatever difference it is. If you're the only one, you're more likely to conform to whatever that majority group is. But if you're onlyness, then you're centering on that source of ideas, and each of us has that ability to sort of tap into it. So that's what I've been researching for 7 years. How do we unlock the ideas and capacity of each of us instead of just the same folks we always hear from?
And so to clarify this is the moving from being the other to being that to be your source.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exactly why I coined the term, is because most of us, women, people of color, the young, are often seen through the lens of other, LGBTQ members, if it's visible. And there's really an opportunity to then kind of go, okay, but I have something original to say. And instead of being dismissed through the lens of otherness, I actually need to find a way to contribute that which only I can.
So as we start to understand our onlyness, what would be the first step to get there, to start exploring that?
Yeah, first step is most of us are doing this thing where we're trying to stand out from the crowd. This is like branding 101 kind of stuff. We say, what is it only I can do? But we're really thinking about it as a comparison model. So, for example, someone will say, what makes you special is that you're the youngest entrepreneur, Glenn, in your case, one of the youngest entrepreneurs who figured out how to make money on the internet. And you could identify that way as a comparison, or you could be thinking about it as you've always been looking for ways for people to connect value creation to value capture. One is comparison to other people, and one is really thinking about what is it I most value. And then also to flip it. So the negative, I'll just take it, that was a positive version of the story. Less positive version would be like, and you've heard me tell this story, Glenn, so I apologize for the repetition, but for our listeners,
yes.
I once got told by someone that I went to for help on a book title. And I had, been working on this sort of notion about how do we create more value in the world. And Harvard had already agreed to the book, but we didn't have a name. And so I went to this guy who's really good at book names and said, would you be willing to help me? He said, absolutely. Let's sit down, let's talk, let's, get together in person. And the first things he said to me when we sat down together was, as a brown woman, your chances of being seen in the world are next to nothing. He took a long pause, and I was waiting for him to come back with but here's an idea. But instead he said, because if you're too because you need to be edgier to kind of stand out from the crowd. But if you're too edgy, then the audience that you most need to listen to it won't. So as a brown woman, your chances of being seen in the world are next to nothing. And what he was noticing was all the things that in his mind made me different, but were actually really, and he was viewing me through the lens of difference, which is what uniqueness does, right? And it's relative. Like, if you think about it, as a brown woman, what he was saying was compared to all the white guys in the management field. So that's what, quote unquote, made me unique. That was the negative version of the same story. But it actually isn't the thing that made me unique, right? It's not the thing that is distinct to me. Because, by the way, 52% of the world is women, so like not very original. And something like 30% of the universe of Americans are people of color. So when he was saying it, he was seeing the outside silhouette and trying to define me by that outside silhouette instead of noticing what was distinct. And so here I am trying to use the word unique as a differentiator between onlyness. Unique is always relative, right? It's always like in context. So you're the youngest entrepreneur or whatever. But instead what we're trying to do is get to what is it that's so distinct to me? And sometimes that's just, I say that and I know it's hard to figure out what it is, because almost always what makes us so distinct is something we take for granted, right? And because as I wrote in The Power of Onlyness, it's like we have a light bulb over our head, and then as we walk into rooms, that light bulb lights that space. So we're like, well, the world is this way. And really it's our particular light that we're shining. So it often takes a friend, and so I'm looking at you, Glen, who can reflect back and say, you know, when you're in the room is mandarin orange or turquoise blue or, you know, whatever it is, right? That particular reflection back. And then I'll be able to see myself more clearly. So that's the first step, is to be able to say, what is it that's so true to me that's not about a relative feature, but really about what is it only I can bring in this room?
And so part of that first step would that be to ask a friend?
Yeah. So I think it's just, you know, taking like all those things that we normally take for granted about ourselves, kind of looking at what is the summation of those things and how do you want to define it? So if I am almost always in my career, at one point I had left a company called Rubicon and I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And I remember going around to some folks who weren't in my inner circle and I asked them, what do you see I'm good at that I could apply to a different field? And like one person said, you're really great at spotting patterns, and that would make you really good at venture. And then another person said something similar but slightly different, which is you've always been able to sort through the 10 different factors and identify which one would shape us in the future. So that would make you really good at teaching, right? And so after I met with 10 people, what was interesting is I had a little more sense of the prism of the ways in which this core set of skills shows up in the world. And they were there was many of them. So, but then you could spot some like trends and go, oh, these are pretty true to me. So yes, exactly. The first step would be to think about how do we see ourselves more clearly and what only we bring to the world.
You were listening to an excerpt of my conversation with Nilla Former, author of The Power of Onlyness. We talk more about how to find your onlyness during the guest interview as part of the Be Your Own Best Coach program. So I want to let everyone know to check out BeYourOwnBestCoach.com, where you can find out more information about our 5-week group coaching program. Listeners of Be Your Own Best Coach Conversations can take 10% off enrollment costs using the keyword conversations. Thanks again for listening, and stay well.